Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo. I'll be your host through this discussion about a movie most of you have probably never heard of, most of you will probably never watch, and when I tell you who directed it, you probably will still run in terror. But that being said, I stand by the mantra that there are no bad movies, especially those that are made with good intentions. And this is a movie that I feel was made with relatively good intentions, despite it having a number of issues. I'm talking about First Shift, the brand new, well, it came out in August, the new movie from legendary filmmaker Uwe Boll. That's right, not you Boll, Uwe Boll. You got to say it right. You got to make sure it's correct. Now, if you don't know who this guy is, you should do your research on who Uwe Boll is. This guy is, when I say legendary, I give him the bona fides for that, okay? So he came on the scene 20 years ago by buying up a whole bunch of video game movie rights like Blood Rain, Alone in the Dark, House of the Dead, Far Cry. And he made Postal, which is his best movie, Dungeon Siege, which became In the Name of the King. Those he is well known for his movies. He is well known for his opinions. He's well known for his antics. And the thing is, the guy is capable of making a good movie, right? You should see, I think it's called Darfur or something to Darfur, was a really well-received one back in the day. He did Rampage, which was well-received. I mean, the guy knows how to make good movies, but he also, kind of tends to get in his own way, my personal opinion. Again, I think it's ego. And Uwe, if you ever listen to this, man, again, no shade. I would love to sit down and talk with you. I actually tried once. I reached out to his assistant to try to get an interview with him. And they wanted to talk about everything other than the video game movies. Never mind the fact that in no way do I ever want to attack those video game movies. I want to know the zaniness. I want to know the stories because I feel like there's a lot there to discuss. Especially on Blood Rain, which when I get around to covering Blood Rain, we'll talk about the meatloaf bit. But anyway, he went on a bit of a hiatus. His last movie was in 2016, and that was Rampage President Down. And then he decided to go and become a restaurateur in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm guessing that didn't really work out very well for him. So he came back with this new movie that he wrote, produced, and directed called First Shift. And this is a movie about a veteran New York Police Department detective who ends up getting a new female partner who is from Atlanta. And it's about their first day on the job. And that's really about it. That is basically the premise of the movie. And if you're thinking, well, what is like the inciting incident? What is going to be the overall theme? Is it going to end with a crazy first day on the job, so on and so forth? Oh, no, it ends with a crazy first day on the job. Make no mistake. And we'll talk about that. But it does not, this is like a day in the life. This is literally like a fly on the wall movie that I think is meant to set up a franchise rather than be seen as anything that could be seen as standalone. And I'll tell you this, I didn't hate it. I was actually very much engaged with it, largely due to Gino Anthony Pesi, who played Dio Russo, the male lead, and Kristen Renton, who played Angela Dutton, the other officer that's in the movie. They have good chemistry, and it kept me engaged. And there's a lot of banter that I really liked, and I'm a sucker for good banter. I really am. And they had good chemistry, and there's a little bit of that will they, won't they sort of thing. I'm glad the movie doesn't go into that. We'll talk more about that as we get into it. But the movie is like, it's one of those things, you watch the trailer for the movie, and you will most likely not be impressed. Because the trailer really encompasses like either the first 30 minutes of the film, and then it kind of has some shots from like the last 10 minutes of the movie. And that's really about it. Like legitimately. And again, it's all kind of nonsensical and it doesn't really go anywhere. But I was still entertained. So I guess that's a good thing, right? Anyway, let's talk about the making of this movie. As always, I like to go into that before we dive into the plot. Um, again, it's gonna be a thing. So back on February 16th, 2023, Variety came out and reported that Uwe Boll was set to begin principal photography on his new movie, First Shift, which was his first film in 8 years. They announced March 31st, 2023, so a little over a month and a half later, that the movie had finished filming in New York and had entered into post-production in Los Angeles. Now, this was a movie they did shoot on location in New York, and they shot it entirely with non-union crews, which is probably one of the reasons why the budget is as what it is, because you could tell that there was most likely a fair amount of non-permitted filmmaking happening in certain places, definitely when it came to the second unit director getting the B-roll. But anyways, they shot this movie, and what he, wanted it to be was something that would kind of be like a kinder, gentler side of Uwe Boll as a director. And I will fully acknowledge this. Yeah, they succeeded in that one. This is a kindler, gentler movie. Until you get to the end, there's some stuff there where he kind of goes into his particular side of things. He goes real dark real quick. But the relationship between the two detectives was definitely what they were building up on that one. Like I said, it felt like it was a first film, like it was like a pilot episode for a TV show sort of thing. But in an interview, Uwe Boll did say that he described this movie as more of like a feel-good film. He says here, people need more feel-good films right now. And then he wanted to highlight the repercussions of developing intimate partnerships in a world as stressful as law enforcement. And, not to say that he was perfect on that one, not to say that it was like, he nailed it, but like, I think that there were elements of it in there. There was like good interpersonal moments in between the two leads. Because they're the most people we spend the most amount of time with in this particular movie. Now, the movie is not without its controversies, and that, of course, is very much what Uwe Boll kind of thrives in, where he lives. And what we know here is that the International Alliance of Theater Stage Employees, or IATSE, that union, had filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, against Uwe Boll and the other filmmakers for unfair labor practices allegedly committed on set, where a small group of crew members alleged that the filmmakers had jeopardized their safety with a prop gun. Line producer Ari Taub had unexpectedly brought to set. This, however, ended without incident after Boll managed to convince the union that rubber guns were used in addition to gunshots, utilizing a mixture of practical and digital effects. A claim corroborated by his German executive producer, Michael Roche. And, ever since the Rust shooting, ever since that whole thing, rubber guns on sets have been a hot topic, right? Like, Dwayne Johnson said he's not going to be using real guns on sets anymore. A lot of other filmmakers have said that they're going to go into using like prop guns and things along those lines. And look, those things look real enough as it is. You go and you watch a John Wick movie, they're not really doing squibs as much anymore, right? It's all digital because it's so fast paced. It's all the gunshots are added in post production. The bullet impact marks, those are added in post production. The blood, that's all added in post production. Like a lot of the stuff these days is added in post production. So it's really not like that big of a change from what we already know. But if they feel like that there was a real gun that was brought in, that can be a problem. And I've had that happen to me before. We were working on a short film and it called for 2 guns, and the director called his buddy, and his buddy brought over what we thought were prop guns, but they were real revolvers. And we were all a little kind of about that, but he didn't have any ammo on him. The guns were not loaded. We checked all that stuff, and we used them very sparingly. But still, it's one of those things where you're like, it's a problem. So I can understand, after Rust, which happened a number of years ago, why crew would probably be concerned about that, considering that these were non-union workers, so they don't have the protections of being part of the union. They're not going to be able to, get anything out of that. So they probably filed a complaint, for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know. However, the complainants then alleged that the filmmakers had threatened them into not participating on a strike in effort to unionize the film. This is contrary to the NLRB's provisions, hence the IATSE's filing. Boll dismissed the accusations as completely baseless, believing that those were done in retaliation by the complainants after their demands to turn the film into a union production were not met. So there we go. That answers that one right there. Not only that, but the two leads in the movie also denied an allegation of on-set animal abuse involving the dog in the film in an email sent to PETA, which received the complaint from an anonymous source. So there is a dog in the movie. He plays a bit of a significant role. The dog is actually Gino Pesi's dog. So it was the lead actor's dog, which is one of the reasons if you watch the movie, you're like, this guy really likes this dog. It's because it's his dog. It's his pupper. So you kind of get all that. And so, yeah, it's like all this stuff happening behind the scenes make you kind of laugh a little bit, just because you're like, okay, guys, like, is this just retaliatory? Is this just whatever? But this is also the game of non-unionized filmmaking. Corners are cut. It gets a little cheaper. You kind of get what you pay for, sort of thing. But people also take it as an opportunity to do things that are so wildly out of the realm of anything the union would allow or be okay with to kind of happen. And I've heard stories over the years. There was a story I heard of a guy who rented a car, got full coverage on the car, took out the seats, put in the roll cage, put in the in the stunt seats, wrecked the rental car, put everything back, and then claimed that he hit a rock and flipped the car. Filmmakers, like, there was a thing for a while when I was in school called the Walmart effect, which is where people would go to Walmart and buy the props that they needed. And then as soon as they were done filming, they'd take it back and they'd return it, getting their money back. Okay. So, like, in the realm of independent filmmaking, which this movie technically falls into that category, there's always going to be corners that are cut, and people, and nowadays are way more vocal, which is good. They should be, because safety on set is the number one thing of it. And never mind, this was happening. Like I said, they started filming this in March of 2023. And they were done over that time period right before the writer's strike and before the actor's strike. But that was all brewing on the horizon at the time. So then we find out that Variety reported on October 30th, 2023, that Quiver Distribution had secured the rights for the American and Canadian markets, as well as selected international territories. And they ended up having the world premiere at the Independent Days Film Fest in Germany on April 10th, 2024. The film was released in theaters, on demand, and digital simultaneously August 30th, 2024. And of course, now it is available on Paramount Plus if you would like to watch it. And it debuted at number 2, to give you an idea. The critics on the movie ain't great, but we'll talk about that here after I talk about the movie. So let's talk about First Shift as a movie. Let me just start off by saying that there is no dialogue in this film for the first 5 to 6.5 minutes of this movie. There's no dialogue in the opening of the movie for the first few minutes as we watch Dio Russo, the detective, get up, get dressed, brush his teeth, make his breakfast, go through his daily morning routine. And then we cut over to some guy named Paul who's sitting on a toilet, clearly having an episode while a woman is yelling at him. And then from there, Russo is like, you can see he's got something going on with his family, right? Here's the thing. This is where the movie kind of messes with you in the beginning. Okay, we cut back to Russo, and then he's looking at a framed photo, and there's a picture of a child, and there's a picture of a woman, and it's torn out. Now, that's obviously a setup for something down the road. That's his personal trauma, obviously. But the way that the film is edited, it makes you think that the guy named Paul that's sitting in a bathroom having an episode holding medication bottles and the woman yelling at him, that woman might be the woman in the photo, right? Like they really do make you believe that. Because it's the only other thing, like story-wise, that makes any sense. So then he goes to work, and then he finds out that, oh, there's a new detective coming up from Atlanta, this woman, Kristen Renton, playing Angela Dutton in the movie. And, you know, she is she's got her little TikTok, her little Instagram stuff. She's taking selfies, and he doesn't like any of that stuff. And she's kind of bubbly, and she's, you know, whatever. And so it's very much meant to be oil and water, right? It's like, you know, the grouch versus the cheery one, that kind of dichotomy. But as they start to kind of like go back and forth, their dialogue gets to be pretty comfortable with one another. And they start kind of like cracking a little bit of jokes here and there. And you can tell a fair amount of it is like either improv or very loosely based upon what Uwe Boll wrote in the script. Like you can tell as they're talking to one another, they are just kind of like trying to like make each other, you know, like laugh in one scene. Like they go off in one scene later on in the film about like cream pies. Like legitimately, they're talking about sexual stuff. And I'm like, come on, you guys are just making it blatant at this point that they're going to bone, you know? And they're like, isn't a cream pie like when you do it in the butt and you pull out and you fire on her back? She's like, no, isn't that like when you come in her and then you suck it out? And I'm like, I'm laughing my ass off watching this thing because I'm like, it's like, for one, what? Like you never hear that. You never hear that in a movie ever. You never hear that in a movie ever. Those kind of words never happen in a film. You will hear them frequently in my live streams, but you will never hear it in a movie. And I just thought that was great. And again, like they had some really good moments, and you know, you can kind of start to see like there's a camaraderie there. It's a little bit forced at times, I'll admit, because like, you know, Deo is kind of like you know, an old you know, you could call him a traditionalist, right? And then she's like, oh, like, is it because I'm a woman? And he's all like, yeah, but is that a bad thing? And you're like, I mean, I guess, you know, they gotta have this back and forth where like she's trying to assert herself and he's trying to be like, well, I'm a man, you know, and like, it's interesting how they do it. You know, it's not the cleanest dialogue in regards to kind of conveying the message, but you know, you can kind of see. And then of course, as it goes on, when they get into the first little problem, there's a guy who is on bath salts or something, and he's wielding a butcher knife. And, you know, Russo tells Dutton to stay back, stay in the car. And he goes over and tries to negotiate this guy to put the knife down. And then she sneaks around behind him and she tases him, you know, and then they kind of get into this confrontation over it, right? And even the drugged out dude who just cut his own body up was like, you two should get a room. I mean, clearly, again, this is before the cream pie comment. So clearly they are setting up that whole sexual tension. Will they, won't they? And quite frankly, you know what? Maybe I'm alone in this. Maybe I'm 100% alone in this one, but I'm like, you know what? Let them bone. Like, you know what? In the next movie, if it happens, let them bone. I think that'd be okay. You know, and then also during this time, we cut over to this elderly black man who's going to the grocery store, and he has his dog. And he ties the dog up outside, goes into the grocery store, has a heart attack. And at the same time, they're at the hospital escorting the druggie with the knife wounds. They, you know, Russo meets the other guy, and he's like, get my dog. And then he's like, where's your dog at? And, you know, tells him, and he's like, he goes and he just leaves and goes and gets the dog. And then they got this dog issue, right? And then from there, it just cuts over to this random scene where you got these two gangsters go into this guy's place. Apparently this guy who, you know, looks like a straight up, like, you know, central casting mafia wannabe type, even with the tracksuit and everything. And he apparently like ripped them off, sold some drugs, made some money. And so they kill him and they kill his kid, which I will admit that scene was actually really good. I really enjoyed that scene. The problem with that scene is that it just went nowhere. Like, we see those guys show up again at the same deli when the cop is there, but that's it. And then later on, we see them at the end of the movie, and they get killed by the mob boss. And then at the end of the movie, we hear that those two guys were found chopped up in a dumpster. And like, that's where the movie ends. Like, by the way, there's no climax to the movie. It's when they say first shift, it is literally the first shift of this woman's job at the NYPD. There is nothing there. Like the climax of the movie is we find out that the Paul guy who was having episodes was her brother, and he kills his girlfriend and her kid in reverse order, by the way. He smothers the kid and then snaps the neck of the girlfriend and then kills himself by cutting his own wrist and bleeding out on the floor. Oddly enough, only cutting one wrist. I mean, you probably would want to do both, right? Just because you want to, I'm just saying, whatever. And then we find out that that's that. And then they kind of have a heart to heart sort of thing. And again, it's kind of building up to this like sexual tension. And he's like, you should sleep here tonight. And then, and you're like, oh, this is where they're going to fuck. And then they don't do that. And that's okay, actually, because it's more like they're friends right now than anything else. And then he's got the dog. And then it cuts to like 3 weeks later. And then he returns the dog to its owner, asks to walk it occasionally. Guy says, okay. And then we find out about the dead hitman. And then that's where it ends. But it ends with a stinger, a trailer, if you will, for First Shift Part 2. And what's interesting about that is there's a bit of a character change with Russo, where in the movie he's wearing all black, right? He's just like, he's shut off, he's grumpy, he's isolated, he wants to be that way. And then when we see the trailer for Part 2, the 3 weeks later thing, he's now got like a more of like a dark red jacket on. He's wearing color. And the color is obviously indicating that he has opened up a bit more, and he has accepted Dutton as his partner, and they have a friendship, and and he's being better as a person. Now, what gets me about all that is the fact that the movie it ends with a trailer for Part 2, and a setup, I guess, for investigating the murders of these two hitmen who killed a father and a son. And that's it. Like, that's where it goes. Like, okay. Right. Like I was entertained by the movie. I really was. I was entertained by the film. And it kind of stuck with me. I was like, all right, because again, I always will give Uwe Boll the benefit of the doubt. I would love to know the budget for this film, because I don't think that it's very much. One of my favorite things about this actually was the way that it tried to kind of incorporate in some ways, the same kind of filming in the vehicle that David Ayer did for End of Watch when that movie came out. There's a lot of you can tell GoPros mounted in the car to get the conversations with the two actors. And then, of course, it cuts back to the hero cam, and the hero cam is in the back seat, and then it's kind of cutting in between. But then whoever did all the B-roll, I want to talk about this, right? Because I noticed this right off the bat. Whoever had the B-roll, whoever was the second unit director, they just literally went around in New York and got highly populated street shots. And they were doing this on a handheld, most likely I'd say a Ronin, the DJI Ronin or something equivalent. A Steadicam, like a mechanical gimbal. And they were getting really just the same neighborhood, because if you watch the B-roll footage, you will notice that the B-roll footage is all from the same neighborhood, right? They show the same street names twice. You'll see the same shops. You'll see a lot of the same stuff. I'm not criticizing. I thought that it was well done. I actually really enjoyed the B-roll shots. I thought those were well framed. Some of the stuff where it was more handheld and they kind of did a couple of the pannings and the tiltings and whatnot, it was a little amateurish, but it still kind of conveyed what they were going for, I think, in those particular scenes. Because you don't really, again, the more you watch this movie, you realize this is a pilot. This is a proof of concept. This is not something that most likely was made with a big budget or intended to be shown on some kind of large screen. Although it was a clean shoot. It was, they had a decent DP. And what was it was Matthias Newman was the DP, just to give him a shout out on this one. Like, he did a pretty good job with what he had. There was one scene in the movie where the audio was like almost unintelligible, and I think that had to do with just like they either didn't get the chance to do the ADR because they were using on-set recording or on-location recording, and they tried cleaning it up as best that they could, but it didn't work out very well. And it was actually during a scene where Dio Russo was like giving this impassioned speech, about about everything. And like, it's just, you can tell the audio is off, but I'll give it up. His performance was actually all right. It was actually a pretty decent thing. At the end of the day, this is not the worst movie I've ever seen. Again, it wasn't made with bad faith intentions. It was made to kind of take Uwe Boll out of his comfort zone and to do something with, humanity, with kindness, about building good relationships, about understanding past trauma and not letting it always define us. I mean, there were moments in this movie that legitimately had good character work. And the scripting wasn't terrible. Like, it was actually all right. Like, it shows you that if he tries, he actually has the propensity to be able to do things like this. Unfortunately, he does, I think if he was to apply this to like what he's known for, which is like schlocky horror, video game adaptation type stuff, or maybe real dark themes, it could actually work out. He's not the world's worst filmmaker. And maybe I've got a little bit, maybe I get caught up a little bit in the bullshit. All right. I did it. But I've always respected this guy despite everything. And I've always given him the benefit of the doubt. And I will always, I find him to be the most fascinating and interesting filmmaker in many ways of our time. You know what I mean? Like, just based on everything I've heard and I've read and I've seen. And I've met people who've worked on his movies. I know Zach Ward, who was in Postal, who was in Blood Rain 2, I think in Blood Rain 3, maybe. And then Lindsay Hofstetter, I think her name is. She was in Blubberella. I know I've met her when I lived in LA and everything else. And her and I were talking once about doing Blubberella. And she told me, she's like, yeah, well, it bought me a house. I hope it's still standing actually in LA right now. But again, it's like the world of Uwe Boll is one that I think needs to be like really investigated, really discussed and shown, because truly there's been no more, I would argue, like interesting filmmaker who just has like the public persona that he does and the ability to put out these movies that he does than Boll. And that's what drew me to First Shift. And I'm not, I don't know if I'd go back and watch it again. I can't say that I would, but I do recommend it as being something to put on if you're just curious. If you've seen an Uwe Boll film and you want to make sure, you want to see him try something a little different, give it a shot. It might grow on you. It grew on me. I'll tell you that much. Like, it grew on me by the end of the movie. So if they do First Shift Part 2, I will watch First Shift Part 2. I will talk about First Shift Part 2. As well as one day I'll go through all of the Uwe Boll films and I will annoy you all to where you unsubscribe. But that being said, thank you guys very much for listening to this episode of Podio Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo. Thank you for going with me on this journey through a movie. Oh, it is a movie called First Shift. And if you guys like these long form discussions, please leave a comment on YouTube. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And follow me on Twitter at mjarbo. I'm also getting ready to kind of go back into Blue Sky and Threads and a few other places, and then also build up a website that we can kind of have all this. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you again. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.